The rivalry is back on.
Welcome back to the Cody Fogger podcast. On with me, special guest and my coworker, Eric Seaman. Eric, how you doing? From Roster Guy. I'm sorry, I forgot to say that. From Roster Guy. Eric, how you doing?
I'm doing great. I just got back from musical rehearsals. I'm in a local musical production, so I'm happy to be on with you after doing musical stuff for 3 hours. I'm glad to talk football with you.
Yeah, dude, me too. It's been kind of one of those days. So for those of you who are listening to the podcast, you don't know what I do. I work with kids at a church up in northern Indiana. And so it's been a good day. We had programming tonight. So I've been here since 9 a.m. And I've been here about 12, 13 hours. So, but Eric, I wanted to talk first about, obviously the Colts played their first regular season game, fell short, but the Colts offense looked pretty good. And I wanted to start by talking a little bit about your impressions of this 2019 Colts offense.
So for those of you who don't know, I host the Roster Guy podcast, and we did our first ever preview, game preview, that launched on Sunday morning right before the game kicked off. We did a couple predictions. I wanted to do a score prediction and then some other prediction for the show, and I actually predicted on that preview that the Colts wouldn't turn the ball over in Los Angeles, and really the closest that they got was a fumbled snap from between Ryan Kelly and Jacoby Brissett that Brissett then immediately recovered. So I was pretty happy about that as far as ball control. Other than that, didn't really see a bad pass from Brissett. He went 21 of 27. Had 190 yards, which is not explosive, but that's a decent amount of yardage, and he had a couple of touchdowns. That second half of that game really reminded me of the movie Blindside, when Leanne Tui, who's portrayed by Sandra Bullock, calls the head coach during the middle of the game and he yells, "Run the dang ball!" Mac ended the game with 25 carries for a league-leading 174 yards, along with a touchdown. Looking over the receiver, T.Y. Hilton, as he does oftentimes, looked unguardable at moments. Had 8 catches, 84 yards, and a couple scores. And that catch by T.Y. With 38 seconds left in the game, where he ran that drag route to the left side of the field, caught it in stride. Defensive back missed the tackle. Thomas Davis, who's usually a pretty sound tackler, over-pursued on the play, and Hilton stopped on a dime to scoot up the field for 19 yards and 6 points. Very impressive. To be able to fly across the field like that and stop that quickly shows me two things. First of all, Hilton's ankles, in my opinion, are some of the best in the league. And while the Mike Evans, Julio Jones mold of receivers really is highly coveted in the NFL because of their size and their catch radius, I'd find it hard to believe that they could do what Hilton did on that play. And it's because of his size. While he's not big, he's about 5'9", 5'10", or somewhere around there. There's so much value in being able to make a play like that where you can just stop real quickly and reverse field or go cut up field. Looking at the offensive line, lastly, they gave up 2 sacks, which is probably about how many I thought they'd give up against a line that features, a duo like Melvin Ingram and Joey Bosa. But Cody, was it just me, or did the offensive line play significantly better in the second half?
Oh, absolutely. And that's one thing I wanted to touch on. And we're kind of going out of order, but that's okay. I didn't really have any specific order for these questions. But Marlon Mack, man, first half, I think he had around 20 yards. In the second half, he had 150 yards, so he ended about 170 yards. Holy smokes, that offensive line, man. They stepped it up in the second half. I remember it was just like some people were even asking me, what is wrong with the offensive line in the first half? Because they couldn't move the ball. They couldn't really protect Jacoby Brissett that much. And it just seemed like there was something off with that offensive line. But it was really good to see them kind of get back into that dominant form that we saw last year. And I think it's something to do, I've talked about this a few times, and I had Zach Hicks of StampedeBlue.com, a friend of the show, on to kind of talk about the change of the philosophy of the offensive line. And that really is, in particular, the pass blocking, where it is about, dominating your opponent instead of letting your opponent, dropping back and letting your opponent come to you. And he said there will be probably some, growing pains with that, but that's kind of the philosophy that Chris Strausser, the new offensive line coach, has. And I think it just took a while to shake off the rust for some of those players and just kind of get into a new system, a system that most of them aren't used to. But it was really good, Eric, to see Marlon Mack and this offensive line really dominate the second half, especially against a really good Charger defense.
Yeah, and there were moments where they were lined up in I would say in 11 personnel, but they were in shotgun, and it'd be 2nd and 6 or 3rd and 6, and they would call a run. I'm like, "What are you doing?" And then he'd gain 7 yards.
Right.
And a lot of times he would not be touched until about 2 yards after the initial line of scrimmage. So that that tells me that they're really getting into a groove, and that they were obviously very confident in their ability to pick up those big chunk yardage plays. And yeah, they had a lot of plays where they were, it was 1st and 10, and they would get 5 or 6 yards, and then they do it again, and they pick up a first down. It was a great way to show that, and really give a lot of confidence to Jacoby that he can go out there and he can really control a game and make sure that the other team does not have the ball more than they should.
Yeah, and that was something, Eric, that I was really this is something that I took a note of. So in the Andrew Luck era, if the Colts were going for 2, they were passing the ball like 9 out of 10 times.
Mm-hmm.
Like that wasn't even a question. Obviously, Andrew Luck, we won't, sugarcoat it. Andrew Luck is a better quarterback than Jacoby Brissett. I mean, I think that's pretty obvious. He was a better quarterback. But with that, Jacoby Brissett's no slouch. Like he played very, very well. But I think it was telling of how dominant this offensive line was, Eric, that they were willing to, on that 2-point conversion, run the football and score because they just knew, like, it was kind of just like something with Frank Reich's philosophy where it's like you just keep using the hot hand, right? You got that run inside works. Let's run it again until they can stop you. And that's something that I've noticed with Frank Reich in the first 2 years is like, why would we stop doing something that works? And it's basically that attacking mode that Frank Reich likes to call plays with is like, we're going to dare them to stop us. Like we're going to impose our will on this defense. And that is something that Frank Reich and this offense really, I think, really took into stride, especially in that game in the second half. They're like, they can't stop us in the interior. Let's just keep running it. And that was something really encouraging to see. But Eric, obviously, there's always going to be some negatives in the game on both sides. What were some of the negative things on offense that you think really need to improve as the Colts travel? I think they travel to Tennessee. So what do the Colts need to clean up on offense if they hope to beat the Titans in week 2?
So on offense, really, I can't think of. Giving up 2 sacks, for an offensive line that only gave up, 16 all of last year. On offense, I can't really think of much. The biggest thing, obviously, is probably the kicking game. So for the offense, that's my thing. As far as the Colts are paying Adam Vinatieri good money. He's going to be, but he's been in the NFL for a while. He could actually be a legitimate father for about half the Colts roster. He's going to be 47 by Christmas time. It was weird seeing him struggle like this, but I'm not worried long term. I mean, every kicker has his bad day. I can't, and honestly, I really can't stand fans who are yelling for him to be cut because of one bad game. He's been money for us for 13 years. I think he'll be fine. I read today, he watched his tape and he has identified some mechanics that he's going to adjust, and he's actually going to do a little bit more work this week, have an extra kicking day. And the problem wasn't the distance. So I'm not sure why people are saying like, oh, he's getting old, we need to cut him. Like there was no problem. Like it's not like his leg was giving out on him as far as distance. It was just, curved to the left or the right those 3 times. So I'm sorry, I don't want to hear about his age. And the thing is, and people might forget that he didn't really play too much. I don't think he played during the preseason. So he probably just had a little bit of rust. And you're going to have that even for a guy who's had his much the amount of exposure that he's had to the NFL game over the years. So I'm not worried about the kicking game.
Yeah, for sure. So obviously the offense, they improved a lot from the first half to the second half. But I think for me, Eric, is just like that consistently bringing it from snap 1 till snap whatever, bringing the consistency every single snap on offense and not fizzling out, not having to settle for field goals. It's just those third downs, I think, was the biggest thing for me. The Colts need to be better on third down. And I don't have a number in front of me what they were on third down, but it seemed like in the critical moments on offense and on defense, the Colts weren't the greatest on third down. So I could definitely see third down being a thing that needs to improve in week 2. Obviously, no team is perfect, so it's always a work in progress there. Okay, so the last thing that I have here for us, Eric, is so obviously wide receiver Devin Funchess went down, jumping for a jump ball. I can't remember what it was exactly for the injury, but he's out. He got placed on injured reserve. He's out for at least, I believe, this 8 weeks, so he can make his return around week 10. But in the meantime, there's going to be some guys who have to step up. And what does that mean for the other wide receivers on this roster? And who do you think has the best chance to step up and kind of fill the void left by Funchess?
So I was actually I left work at 5 today, and rehearsal starts at 6. And I came home and I popped on the TV for a few minutes to relax. And they actually had the replay of that game. And that play, it was actually at the very end. It was that final drive during regulation for the Colts. It was a couple of plays before Hilton made that catch that we were talking about earlier. And you could actually see, I could actually see where the identity of that play was going, because you could see that Funchess, who's a huge guy, 6'4", got to the outside of his guy on the left side of the field, and they were probably about 20 yards. They were just within the red zone, and he just came down, and I could tell the way he landed. And he just kind of laid there. I'm pretty sure he just fractured his clavicle, and so he got up, and you could tell he was not laying his hand down at his side, because he couldn't bear to have all that weight from his arm stressing on that part of his body. But as far as what this injury means, it really just kind of depends week by week. That's what I love about this team. I've said it countless times on the Roster Guy podcast, is that this team is so they can go out there and essentially come out with a different team, have the same players, but really have a different team every week. If you told me going into the Chargers game, early Sunday afternoon, that Zach Pascal would have the third most snaps for the Colts receivers and that Chester Rogers would have 0, I would have scoffed at you. But that appears to have been, what the game plan was going into each half. Obviously, a lot of that had to do with the fact that Zach Pascal is arguably our best run blocking receiver. But obviously, this means more opportunities for Deon Cain, who's going to be the team's number 2 guy now after Hilton. I think he could really thrive in that role, because he has. I remember that catch he had. I think it was on our first drive, where he went right through Casey Hayward's hands, and he was somehow able to keep his concentration on it. He was able to snag it in. Deon Cain has all the makings to be a legitimate number 2 guy on a team. Now, I do expect tight end Eric Ebron to get some more snaps too. He is not what you would call a traditional tight end. He is kind of that more of a receiving threat. And he actually didn't see a lot of playing time against the Chargers. You really saw Jack Doyle receive most of the number 1 tight end snaps for this game. But considering Ebron's skill set as that big-bodied receiving threat, we could see him split away from the offensive line several times against Tennessee. I really look forward to see how they're going to use him against Tennessee, especially with they have an all-pro safety in Kevin Byard, who could really give Ebron some fits.
Yeah, for sure. I know the tight ends didn't get super involved in week 1, but they were obviously a huge factor last year. With Eric Ebron, with Mo Alley Cox a little bit. Jack Doyle, when he was in the lineup, was pretty effective. And also, Jack Doyle also has more of a history with Jacoby Brissett than I would say any of these receivers on the team right now. And
T.Y. and Jack Doyle back in 2017 were by far his 2 favorite targets, if I remember
right.
correctly.
And that was the year that Jack Doyle made the Pro Bowl, and that was also the year where I think he recorded the second most receptions of a Colts tight end in Colts history with AD, and he also has 690 yards and 4 touchdowns. So he's got some rapport there with Jack Doyle, and I think with the loss of Funchess, yes, it'll give guys like Cain, guys like Pascal, who maybe even guys like Chester Rogers another chance. But it'll also give more of the tight ends more of a chance as well to make an impact. So it's going to be an interesting thing to see how the Colts fill the void. They definitely have a lot of talent there. So the drop-off won't be significant, I don't think. I think it still will be felt, obviously. But, yeah, it's I'm not too worried because Frank Reich has a lot at his disposal, and I think he knows how to use that well. And the good news is Devin Funchess is going to be back at some point this season. Mm-hmm. It's not a season-ending injury. So, down the road, if the Colts are finding themselves battling for a playoff spot, Devin Funchess can come back and provide some more juice on the offensive side. Well, thanks, Eric. I appreciate you, man. Appreciate you coming on, talking about everything Colts and about the Colts offense. And yeah, man, it's going to be an exciting week 2. Obviously, Tennessee had a really good game in week 1, but we also know that the Colts have pretty much owned Tennessee since Andrew Luck was drafted, really since 2012. So it'd be interesting to see now. Jacoby Brissett never beat Tennessee, so it'll be interesting to see now with this revamped Colts team if they can pull it out there in Nashville. So thanks, Eric, and I appreciate you, man. Where can we find your work?
So I focus more on the podcast for Roster Guide more than anything now. That's kind of takes over my time. But yeah, I mean, on Twitter you can follow me. I'm at Colts Commentary. I actually just came out I come out with an article every now and then. I actually have a writing background outside of Roster Guide. I used to work for a newspaper. But I actually just came out with an article like a few days ago for Roster Guy regarding some players to watch out for that the Colts might be looking to sign next offseason. That took me a few days, a lot of research, but you can find that at rosterguy.com. And then for the Roster Guy podcast, you can subscribe to us on Spotify or Apple Podcasts.
All right. Well, sounds good, Eric. Well, thanks, man, for coming on. Appreciate you. And yeah, we'll look forward to an exciting game for week 2.
Go Colts.
Go Colts.